Don't ignore that ringing in your ear, that tiny, impossible-to-ignore buzz that shows up out of nowhere. If you've ever felt that brief chime, that momentary whistle, you already know how it interrupts everything. It steals attention. It makes you look up from the page. It makes the world tilt for a second. In this video, I'll walk you through what that sound might actually mean, why it feels so urgent, and how a simple framework, rooted in perception, resonance, and what some traditions call the MONAD, can help you turn a single second of noise into a useful signal. You'll learn how to tell whether the sound is likely biological or something subtler, what to do when it happens, and one small practice that clarifies whether the ring is calling you inward or just reminding you to get your hearing checked. Before we go deeper, if the ringing becomes constant, painful, or interferes with hearing, please consult a medical professional. This conversation is about interpretation and awareness, not diagnosis. Keep that boundary clear as we explore the possibility that sometimes, under quiet conditions, your ears pick up more than the world. Your inner field may be tuning in. That tiny ring, it's rarely random, but it also isn't always mystical. There are two useful categories to hold in your mind from the start. The first is biological, what most clinicians call tinnitus, a physical sound perception that has many causes, from exposure to loud noise to earwax to neurological factors. It can be harmless, or it can be a sign you need care. The second category is what I want to spend time on, a brief, timed awareness signal that tends to arrive at threshold moments, waking, drifting off, pausing before a decision, when attention loosens and the boundary between inner and outer awareness thins. That second type is subtle, short, and often followed by a felt clarity, a memory, a sudden insight, or an urge to move in a small direction. Think of it this way. Imagine you're tuning an old radio. Most of the time you hear static or the bland carrier of day-to-day noise, but sometimes, as you tilt the dial slowly, the radio finds the edge of a station. The music leaks through for a second before it settles. That edge is the threshold. That leak is the ring. The monad, a word used across spiritual traditions to name a unified source field behind consciousness, is a conceptual way to describe whatever unified field might be the origin of those leaks. I use the word monad like a label on a map. It points to the terrain without pretending to be the landscape itself. It's not a deity in this talk, not a dogma. It's a name some people use for the background hum that underlies thought and perception. When your attention drops into stillness, the boundary thins and the background can briefly manifest as a tiny frequency inside your ear. Why the ear? Why not the eyes or the hands? Because hearing is uniquely sensitive to patterns of resonance and timing. Your ears function as catchers of vibrations. Even when there is no external sound source, your nervous system can register internal vibrations as perception. When the threshold between internal and external awareness narrows, during that blur between sleep and wakefulness, or when you stop doing and start sensing, what was background becomes briefly audible. The ring is like the wave before the shore, a prelude. You feel the swell, and if you pay attention, you notice what shifts in you right after. This is not mystical showmanship, it's a pattern. People who are more introspective, who cultivate stillness, or who habitually monitor inner signals tend to notice these leaks more. I prefer the term attuned to chosen because being attuned is about practice and habit, not destiny. It means you spend more time near the edge where the field becomes perceptible. For many people, the signal lands exactly when the mind relaxes enough to catch it. When you blink away the visual dominance that usually holds your attention, when you stop narrating every moment, when the body inhales reality and the heart listens. So how can you tell whether that ring is a biological blip or an awareness signal? Here is a short, practical checklist you can use in the moment. Keep it simple. context, feeling, duration, and outcome. 1. Context. Where were you when it happened? If you were in a noisy, loud place or you just left a concert, treat it as biological. If you were in quiet, waking, drifting off, pausing in the middle of a decision, it may be an awareness signal. 2. Feeling. Did the ring come with alignment and clarity or with pain and anxiety? An awareness ring often arrives with a soft sense of rightness, a tightening of attention towards something meaningful. A biological ring is more likely to be irritating, sharp, or accompanied by discomfort. 3. Duration. How long did it last? Brief, fleeting chirps, 1 to 3 seconds, lean towards signal. Persistent, constant ringing that lingers minutes to hours or that changes your baseline hearing should be checked by a clinician. 4. Outcome. What happened after the ring? Did you get an intuitive insight, a memory, a nudge to act, or a feeling that something had shifted? If so, that's a clue the ring was doing informational work. If nothing follows, or if the ring repeats without any actionable sense, err on the side of medical evaluation. These 4 items, context, feeling, duration, outcome, form a quick filter you can run through in the seconds after the sound. Later in this video, I'll give you a tiny practice you can do immediately when the ring comes to help you test it. But first, let's sketch the theoretical frame with a few more metaphors so it feels less abstract. Picture yourself standing on a beach at dusk. You can't see the whole ocean. You only have the wave you can feel and the noise of seabirds. Most of your life you live at a vantage point where language, images, and labels dominate. You interpret the world mostly by sight and by the story you tell yourself. But sometimes the ocean breathes a different way. A single wave arrives that doesn't wash over you like a full tide. It grazes the sand, leaves a shimmer, and then retreats. That shimmer is like the fleeting ring, a small gust of something from a much larger field, the inhale of reality, the moment when your inner world expands to meet the outer, sometimes comes as a sound, not a word. Another metaphor. Think of attention as a lamp that usually points outward. For most people, perception is dominated by that outward beam, visual images, language, conceptual thinking. But if you dim the lamp, other senses come online. The ear, the gut, the subtle register in your chest, those become clearer. The ringing is often a sign that the lamp dipped and the other senses had a chance to register the underlying field. Training to recognize it doesn't require belief in any particular metaphysical system. It requires the habit of noticing subtle shifts and asking, what just changed inside me? When this happens at certain timing points, right after waking, right before falling to sleep, a momentary pause after a big decision, or in silence following emotional processing, the chances that it's an awareness signal rise. These moments are thresholds. The body and mind are between states, not fully anchored in either. In those thin places, perceptions from the unified background are more likely to leak through. People often ask, does this mean the ring is telling me what to do? Not exactly. The ring is not an instruction, it's an attention pointer. It points toward a place you can inspect. If the ring nudges you, it nudges toward inquiry, not command. It says, look here. It doesn't say, jump now. Think of it like the Doppler before the decision, the quiet beep that calls you to check your instruments, not a forced autopilot. The healthy response is curiosity, plus a tiny test move, not a leap of faith. Here's a practical sequence you can use within the minute after you hear the ring, something you can do standing, walking, or lying down. 1. Pause. Stop whatever story your mind is spinning. Let activity slow by the length of a single breath. 2. Notice tone and location. Where did the ring feel strongest? One ear, both ears, inside the head? Did it have a tonal quality? High, low, metallic? 3. Ask one tiny alignment question silently. Does this invite a small, true step? Keep the question simple and avoid grand decisions. Replace, "Is this my life calling?" with, "Is this a step I can try?" Smallness protects you from overloading interpretive bias. 4. Take one small aligned action. A 5-minute reflection, a quick message to someone you were thinking of, a scribble in a notebook, a short walk toward or away from something. The action should be reversible and minor. The goal is to test resonance. If the ring was pointing correctly, you'll often feel that action match with a sense of rightness. If it wasn't, you'll feel neutral or doubtful, and you can course correct without cost. Practice this short loop, pause, notice, ask, try, and you will get better at distinguishing noise from signal. The test itself becomes evidence. Outcomes inform interpretation over time. Discernment is not a one-off flash. It is a pattern you build. Let me share a composite story to make this concrete. Imagine a woman named Lila, composite, anonymized but lifelike. She wakes up one morning with a quick, bright ping in her left ear, just as she sits up. For a second she freezes, the ring still whispered in that liminal space between dream and day. She paused, noticed the left-sided chirp, and asked the small question, "Does this invite a small step?" She decided to send a short text to a friend she had been thinking about for weeks. Nothing big, just, "Thinking of you. Are you free for coffee this week?" The friend replied within hours, and the conversation opened into a lead that later turned into a partnership. The initial ring didn't spell out the partnership. It just nudged Lila to make a small, reversible move that aligned with her inner attention. Over time, she learned to trust the sign as a pointer, not a prophecy. That example highlights another important distinction. The ring can serve as a timing signal. It's often less about content and more about tempo. It tells you when to pause and when to lean into attention. Think of it like a metronome in a recording studio. The metronome doesn't produce the song, it provides the beat. Similarly, the ring can mark the rhythm of moments where inner and outer worlds are especially porous. Now a brief word on what the monad means in this conversation, since that term appears in the title and people will expect it. The monad here is a conceptual shorthand used in various traditions to name a unified field behind consciousness, the background that all individual minds appear inside of. Use the term sparingly. It helps to think of the monad as the ocean to individual waves, the background hum that makes localized perception possible. Saying monad doesn't assign theological status or scientific certainty. It simply offers a name to talk about a pattern of experience in a way that is consistent with several contemplative traditions. The important part is the pattern, threshold moments, frequency leaks, and how you respond. Why is this relevant culturally? Because perception itself may be shifting. Human attention has long been shaped by language, images, and narrative. We evolve socially and technologically around those modes. But there's an argument, tentative, speculative, and offered as an interpretive frame, that as more people cultivate practices that favor stillness and non-verbal awareness, collective sensitivity to frequency-based signals could increase. That doesn't mean we'll stop using words. It means that alongside narrative knowing, more people may develop an ability to sense resonance, micro-alarms, felt intuitions, subtle premonitions, without language bridging the gap first. Imagine a culture not of prophecy, but of quiet, mutual noticing. People who recognize the meter of attention in others and respond with small, aligned action. Again, that is a speculative claim. It's seductive to imagine a future in which everyone is tuned in. But be cautious. Increased sensitivity offers benefits and responsibilities. Sensitivity can amplify anxiety if not grounded. It can also nurture empathy if cultivated with practices that stabilize the nervous system. The path toward greater attunement is less about becoming mystical and more about learning to notice without spinning stories that attach meaning prematurely. Which brings us back to practical habits you can practice now to increase useful discernment and reduce false alarms. First, cultivate mini-stills. Multiple times a day, take 30 seconds to close your eyes, soften visual dominance, and breathe. Let the interior landscape settle. This practice doesn't promise illuminations. It simply increases the probability that you'll notice genuine signals without mistaking ordinary noise for meaning. Second, keep a ring journal. When the ring happens, jot one line: time, context, feeling, what you noticed next, and any small action you took. After a week, patterns emerge. You may discover that certain rings always arrive before decisions about work, or that a particular tonal quality correlates with emotional shifts. Data trumps guesswork. Third, build reversible experiments. Use the pause and small action loop as an experiment system. The world gives feedback quickly on small moves. This keeps interpretation grounded and reduces the temptation to create grand narratives from fleeting sensations. Fourth, maintain medical common sense. If the ring repeats, becomes louder, or is accompanied by dizziness, hearing loss, pain, or other disturbing symptoms, seek a medical evaluation. Protecting the body is not separate from spiritual life. It's part of the same practice of stewardship. Another short anecdote. A man we'll call Aaron was trying to decide whether to say yes to a job that would move him across the country. He heard a clear, second-long ring while brushing his teeth one morning, right after he'd been ruminating on pros and cons. He paused, used the small question test, "Is there a tiny next step?" and sent a 10-minute email to the company requesting a short call to clarify his role. That call revealed an operational detail that mattered to his sense of meaning. The ring didn't make the choice. It prompted a low-cost move that illuminated information he needed. Over time, Aaron's habit of testing rings kept him from making irrevocable choices based on a single feeling. Now, let's return to a few practical signals that can help you in the moment. These are short micro-habits you can rehearse until they become automatic. When the ring appears, breathe out fully once before making any interpretation. That single exhale steadies the system and prevents immediate story-making. Treat the ring as a pointer to curiosity. Ask one clarifying question, not a sermon. What small thing can I try is better than what does this mean for my life? Keep actions small, reversible, and oriented toward information, not identity. The goal is to gather feedback, not to demonstrate faith. Use the ring as a metronome for attention. If you find yourself repeatedly ignoring the ring, you dull a potential learning mechanism. If you become hyper-superstitious about it, you inflate minor sensations into controlling myths. Balance is the skill. Throughout this path, stay humble about interpretation. The ring may be signaling interior alignment. It may be an ear issue. It may be coincidence. Practice over time without hurry. The most reliable method of discernment is pattern recognition. Collect data, calibrate, and refine your responses. We should also acknowledge the common anxiety. What if everyone who experiences this suddenly believes they must obey every internal beep? The antidote is intentional smallness. When you narrow your responses to tiny experiments, you limit the cost of error and lean into feedback. The universe, if we can use such a term, doesn't demand grand gestures. It rewards steady, curious attention. There are a few common misunderstandings to clear up. First, the ring is not proof of spiritual superiority. Sensitivity is not virtue. Many people are sensitive and use it to cultivate compassion. Many others are less sensitive and cultivate wisdom through different modes. Both ways are valuable. Second, the ring is not a magical guarantee that every small action will yield success. Sometimes, a ring is a false positive or a misfire. The value lies in the practice of testing and learning. Third, you do not need an elaborate ritual to use the ring. The method I described, pause, notice, ask, try is plain and accessible. Before we close, I'll offer a slightly larger frame, the cultural and personal implications if more people paid attention to these subtle signals. Imagine communities where people practiced small reversibility, where decisions were often preceded by a pause and a 5-minute experiment. Imagine workplaces that value short tests and reversible moves instead of only big commitments. That cultural shift would not be mystical, it would be pragmatic. A society that practices tiny experiments and careful listening may make fewer high-cost errors. The ringing in the ears, then, becomes a micro-practice prompt for a broader ethic of attention. Now, the final checklist, 3 to 4 steps you can memorize and use in real time. This is the distilled tool for when the ring occurs. Quick real-time checklist. 1. Pause for 1 breath. 2. Note context and quality. Where, when, how it felt. 3. Ask 1 small alignment question. Is there a tiny step I can try? 4. Take a reversible action and observe the immediate outcome. Use this checklist the next time you experience that brief ring. It will turn an ambiguous sensation into an experiment with feedback. Over time, you'll become more confident about which rings seem to point toward meaningful changes and which are simply background noise. One more medical reminder. If the ringing becomes constant, painful, or interferes with hearing, please consult a medical professional. This guidance is not optional. Your ears and nervous system deserve medical attention when symptoms are persistent or worsening. And we wrap up. Remember the central idea that brief, timed ringing in the ears can be 2 things at once: biological noise and a subtle pointer. When it happens in quiet thresholds, it can be a leak from a field of awareness, what some traditions call the MONAD. But the ring is never a decree. It's a nudge to attention. Treat it like the radio finding a station seconds before the music begins, a cue to pause, to listen, to ask a small question, and then to try a tiny, reversible move. If this resonates, and you want more practical frameworks for decoding subtle signals, how to distinguish gut feelings, tactile nudges, and mental hunches, tap subscribe. I make short, testable tools for people who want to develop reliable inner calibration without becoming superstitious about every sensation. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had that single-second ring that seemed to come right before a shift? Share 1 line in the comments about when it happened and what followed. No long stories, just the moment and the result. I read them all, and over time those notes help build a communal map of what patterns tend to matter. And once again, if the ring you're hearing is constant, painful, or interfering with hearing, please seek a medical evaluation. Protect the body while you cultivate the subtle senses. Don't ignore your ringing ears, but don't hand them the reins either. Use them as a metronome for curiosity. Pause, breathe, ask 1 small question, try 1 small step. Over time, each tiny practice becomes a way to move from noise into signal, from confusion into careful knowing.